I'm thrilled to introduce Eileen Loustau, who's here from San Francisco, and she is the Global Director of Social Media at BlackRock. Eileen, in less than 18 months, developed and successfully launched iShares' social media strategy and was recognized by Casina, and she'll tell you more about that. Before Eileen comes on, I asked her a couple of months ago, so, what are the key attributes, the key ingredients that someone in your position needs to basically deal with the inroads or to achieve the inroads that you've achieved? And 3 words came to mind to her: risk taker, hostage negotiator, and agile decision maker. Anyway, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Eileen.
Thank you. Thank you. I can't actually think of 2 better lead-up acts to what I'm going to talk about today. It's all about the share, and a lot of the themes that Jill and David actually spoke about, I will be echoing. And I am going to talk for about 35 minutes and then hopefully open it up for some questions. So I thought you might appreciate a little bit of narrative. So I start with, once upon a time, we decided that we might start a social media practice. And in the summer of 2010, my boss at the time actually says to me, and I was in charge of educational content and digital content for iShares.com. My boss comes up to me and he says, "We're going to hire a contractor to start social media." And I was like, huh? It's sort of like, meh. I was like, huh? We're gonna what? And he's like, yeah, I'm gonna hire a contractor who's gonna come in and we're gonna start thinking about how to use social media to engage with our clients. And I remember at the time thinking, this is sort of crazy. Financial advisors aren't using social media. I'm like, I'm not using social media, and since I am the average age of a financial advisor, I therefore assumed, I'm not using it, they're not using it. Interestingly enough, this summer of 2010 happens to coincide with my 20-year business school reunion, which probably also tells you why I was not using social media. Being sort of older, etc., I get this plethora that summer of people on Facebook who are starting to talk on the reunion. And it is interesting that the majority of people in this demographic usually get introduced to Facebook and a lot of other things actually through reunions. So I start getting on Facebook. I realize, hey, maybe we just need to think a little bit harder about how we actually could engage with financial professionals on social media. Unfortunately, the contractor was only here for 6 weeks. This poor woman talked to a lot of the marketing leadership, and everyone said, we can't do anything because we are so regulated. So the words that I sort of have up on the screen are, knowing that I'm a Series 24 and I have been looking over content for over 20 years towards financial advisors, we know that it's just amazingly hard to actually say things without a boatload of disclosure. So I just want to play a quick video of an example of breaking it down at iShares. You can play the video.
If you invest, you've probably heard about ETFs, or exchange-traded funds. But what exactly is an ETF anyway? In a lot of ways, ETFs are kind of like flower bouquets. Imagine that an individual stock is a flower. Just like companies come in different sectors and sizes, flowers come in all kinds of shapes and colors. Now take a bunch of different flowers and bundle them up according to a specific recipe, aka an index, and you've got yourself an ETF. And the price of an ETF is based on the price of the stocks that make up that ETF. So when the prices of the individual flowers go up, so does the price of the bouquet. Okay, so you get what ETFs are, but why should you use them? ETFs tend to be low cost, tax efficient, liquid, and transparent. What's more, they enable you to build a diversified portfolio with just a few trades. There you have it, ETFs, short and sweet. Thanks for watching, and happy trading. Call 1-800-iShares to request a prospectus, which includes investment objectives, risks, fees, expenses, and other information you should read and consider carefully before investing. Investing involves risk, including possible loss of principal.
Yes, thank you for telling me that. Going back to our data and this idea of share it, please. So, charts. I think Nicole and I recently were going to call a blog post, "Don't have a chart attack," or like Chartastic or something. We were going to take all of our infographics and all these great charts and actually just make it like one big blog post. But what we really started doing right away was actually moving into infographics and how can we actually make this kind of data much more visually appealing and much more shareable. I mean, some charts are really cool, but I think the idea of actually sharing a chart is sort of hard, where, as we all know, the infographic can help you tell the story. And I specifically remember the brainstorming session that we sat in at with our team, talking about how could we talk about the new emerging markets, and that was pretty hysterical because everyone's like, does anybody even know what the old emerging markets are, right? So once again, you have this like investment strategist who's coming to you saying, I want to talk about the new emerging markets, and you're like, I'm sorry, I missed the first quiz, right? And so this helped, I think, actually lay out, just in case you missed it, what was considered emerging markets in the early days, and now what really is emerging markets 2.0. And this and infographics in general have also sort of solved a couple of, I would say, challenges for us. So one is we have this great shareable visual content, and the other piece is I've had numerous people in the organization, once we started seeing success, come up to me and say, should we be on Pinterest? And I'm like, okay, Pinterest, demographic, it's Jill's demographic, 18 to 44, women. I'm like, yeah, okay, think. Interestingly enough, we don't have an owned presence on Pinterest, but every single one of our infographics ends up on Pinterest because people come and like it and put them in their beautiful walls and collages. So we actually, through completely earned, and this is yet another example of the share it please, meaning that financial advisors again have come back to us and said, thank you so much for this. Can I have a PDF of that because I want to email it to my clients, or, still sort of back there, but we're like, no, this is digital, you can, and we've helped people actually figure out how they can then share it with their clients. So it's very much all about the share. And then our third lesson, super duper hard. This whole idea of how can you be a person and not a company. I was listening to Jill, as hopefully you all were, and I think it's sort of easy to say, oh, well, you can do social media so much easier than I can because you're a person. You're Jill at money.com, and you're so cool and you're so funny, right? I am a brand. I am iShares. I am BlackRock. How do I infuse that person in there? And gosh, we spend a ton of time doing this, and people often ask me, and I do think it's a talent. I mean, a lot of us in our group, I hate to say it, on my team, have are thespians at heart, and we've done improv and we've done a lot of stuff, and I think we take this mindset when we start thinking about how do we act on Twitter and how do we write things. We do a lot of, happy Administrative Professionals Day in local markets. If there's a big race, like in San Francisco, we have Beta Breakers, in London there was just the London Marathon. We do a lot of what I would call sort of local tweeting in that region. We also, once again, this is the cool stuff, curate We try to save about 33% of our Twitter strategy. I always put everything in threes. So about a third of our Twitter strategy, we really do try to just be replying and retweeting our influencers and our followers and making it really that symbiotic relationship that you want on Twitter. And so therefore, we're doing a lot of retweeting and a lot of sort of cool curation. I'll talk a little bit about Facebook sort of on the next slide. We've also really tried to engage on Facebook. We had a, last Father's Day, we actually had a little contest asking people to ask their kid what they think their dad does for a living. And this one sort of one, which is really cute, you know, daddy works on the computer, daddy travels on airplanes, like 747s and A380s, you know. It was just really cute. But sort of the pièce de résistance was Russ Kostridge is our Chief Investment Officer. And it's interesting, Russ's social media cred and his sort of role at iShares BlackRock as Chief Investment Strategist have all sort of collided. So Russ is, a lot of Russ's voice is about 50% of our blog. We sat down with him last Father's Day and sort of said, hey, wouldn't it be cool if you did something more, you know, like maybe talking to your dad or giving your dad financial advice? And he was like, no, my dad doesn't want financial advice. He's like, but maybe maybe I'd write something to my son who's 7. And so let me just really quickly, I sort of abridged Russ's letter. But when we talk so much about how can you be a person and still be a credible Chief Investment Officer, I think this is a great example. So here's what Russ wrote last Father's Day. Dear son, you are 7, a great age for many reasons. You're old enough that I no longer have to watch Thomas the Train, but you're still young enough that when we read together, you let me pick a few books that I like. And you get excited when I bring back a stuffed kangaroo from Australia. In short, you're at an age where I can still solve most of your problems. So this Father's Day, I thought I'd take the opportunity to offer some advice, and at least some advice about your financial well-being. So my #1 recommendation, find a job you truly love doing because you're going to be doing it for a long time. And if you can find something for, say, 50 years or so, that would be a good thing because the government may not be much help when you want to retire. My second advice, save. It's both the easiest and the hardest, and it requires discipline, so the earlier you start, the better. The third piece of advice concerns what to do with the savings. If you want more return, you'll need to take more risk. Diversification is the one loophole in that rule. Probably only his kid knows what diversification means at 7, but that's okay. So that's pretty much it. Nothing that original, but I'd like to believe that following this advice will save you from at least a few of life's little hiccups. And know that if you stumble, I will always be there, stuffed kangaroo in hand. Love, Dad. So I remember when I read that actually at work, because I have a 7-year-old, you know, the waterworks just sort of started. And the shock that Russ Kostridge actually completely wrote this himself. It's like so real and so from the heart. It was amazing. Going global. Is anybody also sort of treading the waters of moving from US to global? I need a bigger boat. I think what's really interesting about this is we want to keep our blog-centric strategy, and in fact we are, and hopefully in the middle of the summer we'll be launching our new global blog. And so we are going to be using a brand new platform. So just so you know, it is possible. It is possible to have a blogging platform that actually has geolocation in it, so that you could actually put in different content streams, and then those content streams would only only be available in the regions from where the people are sitting and want to read it. Our other big, huge thing is we're just getting much deeper on LinkedIn. Elizabeth Chu, who's also here from my team, is our LinkedIn community manager. For the first time ever, we actually have a dedicated community manager to a platform, which we've never had before. And we really do think the opportunity here is huge. For all the reasons that I'm sure you already know. But I think for us, where we're trying to break some ground here is this idea of not treating, so this is my thought, so not treating LinkedIn as your owned property. So I think the first step on LinkedIn was, do you have company pages? Great. Do you want followers to your company page? Sorry, not really. I mean, my company page is evergreen, sort of static. I mean, I can put posts up. What I want on LinkedIn is I want us to be part of the conversations that are already happening around investments, that are already happening about exchange traded funds, that are happening about the markets. So what we're really looking at LinkedIn as is where are those great conversations, and then how can we jump in there with our point of view? Because remember, we said point of view was super important. So this is sort of groundbreaking stuff for us. Rather than just being posting machines, can we actually be people who jump into conversations and really get deeper with influencers? So while we're also taking LinkedIn up on the opportunity to do promoted content, and I have to say that's been amazingly effective. I actually also oversee our digital advertising creative. And we all know for people who do digital advertising, you know, benchmark says click-through rate is 0.08. 0.08. This is such a depressing number, 0.08. We're seeing on LinkedIn double that. We're seeing like a 0.15 on some things. We saw if Larry Fink's name is in it, we see like a 0.5. It's crazy. So we're also going to take LinkedIn hopefully up on their offer to have Larry Fink, our CEO, join the influencer program. It just seems like it's the place where, once again, if you do want to be job title specific, you know, this is the place. And I've been really impressed with LinkedIn's ability to sort of target different segments that we hadn't even thought about. So while high net worth is a little bit of a, you know, we've been able to target entrepreneurs and small business owners and other people that, of course, we think are probably high net worth. So we really appreciate our partnership with LinkedIn, and we are focusing so much more there. So jump in the conversation. Yay. Talking about success, what does it mean? I put this picture up because this is the summer of 2010 when I was in Washington, D.C. for my reunion, and one of the first pictures I ever put up on Facebook. And it was funny to me because I didn't know what anybody would say. And it's probably still actually one of the #1 pieces of engagement I got, because the reunion was happening and everyone was saying, "Oh, your son looks like a young JFK." And I'm like, I don't know if he does or not, but it's sort of funny that still I, as a person, and I guess because of my role, have never actually, people follow me on Twitter and I'm like, okay, I don't know why. I've tweeted like 3 times and I think it's all been about Cal volleyball. So, I mean, like, whatever. I personally still haven't blended my business persona with my personal persona, but like a Sally Krawcheck, I think we probably all have opportunities at some point, because we're good at content curation, of actually thinking about how could you help your friends maybe on their digital investment journey. But the one metric that we really have been focused on is actually what we call our earned media. So knowing that we talked about awareness, consideration, and engagement, and seeing what we had traditionally been paying for that kind of opportunity in digital advertising, we sort of reverse engineered our numbers in social for awareness, consideration, and engagement, and actually came up with a real live number. And our number in 2011 was that all of the impressions, clicks, and engagement we generated would have cost us $7 million in paid digital advertising. And then in 2012, it would have cost us $12 million. And so this year, we're on track to probably hit somewhere in the neighborhood of $17 to $18 million worth of earned advertising. And I know that when I sit with my boss and tell her that, she's very happy. She likes that number a lot. So even though, once again, we can't tie things to purchase, it's so possible to actually come up with real numbers that actually show the value of what you're doing with your program. The moral of this whole story has been, success and what you do, it all keeps changing. And I tell everyone all the time, I personally believe there's no such thing as social media strategy. There's just social media test and learn, and every day is different. And just taking those opportunities as they come along is probably the best recommendation I could make.